Hello, and welcome to Slow Night Ancient Tales. Tonight's story comes from Korea's oral folklore tradition, a tale of King Sukjong, said to have used the magical art of ground shrinking to travel across the whole country in a single night. It begins with a strange sound coming from a small cottage and unfolds into a story of grief, an unusual kindness, and an unexpected reunion years later. King Sukjong was said to possess a mysterious power, the ability to shrink great distances, letting him cross the entire country in a single night and still return to the palace before dawn. One such night, as he passed through Gakcheong in Jeolla province, he came upon a small cottage. From inside came a strange sound, one voice weeping bitterly, another laughing warmly. Stranger still, the two sounds seemed to alternate, back and forth, as if in turn. Curious, the king stepped inside and asked about it. What he learned was this. The elderly couple had remained childless until their 40s, when they were finally blessed with a son. But not long after the boy learned to walk, he passed away. Too old to hope for another child, the grieving parents couldn't bear to bury him. Instead, they had carefully dried and preserved his small body, keeping him close. Every night for 7 years, they took turns comforting him as though he were still alive, one weeping in grief while the other laughed gently as if soothing a child. Moved deeply by their sorrow, the king resolved to help them, though not in the way they expected. He asked to see the child, and while pretending to comfort the boy himself, he suddenly scooped him up and dashed out the door. The stunned couple gave chase, but there was no catching a man who could shrink the very ground beneath his feet. They were left behind, bewildered and grief-stricken all over again. Meanwhile, the king carried the child through the night, searching the country for the right place to lay him to rest. He came at last to a wide field in Gilju, Myeongcheon, in Hamgyong province, where an old pavilion tree stood beside a small shrine. The king recognized this spot as a place of rare fortune, a place where, it was said, a departed child could return as a grandchild reborn. There he carefully buried the boy and departed. Not long after, as it happened, the governor of that very province passed away, and a new governor was appointed to take his place, a man with a daughter of 17 or 18. As the new governor's household traveled to take up his post, they stopped to rest beneath that same old pavilion tree in the heat of the day. The daughter needed to relieve herself, and since the shrine nearby was enclosed by a wall, she stepped inside for privacy. Strangely, though she felt the urge, nothing happened. Only a strange, unexplainable sensation passed through her. Not long after arriving at their new home, her belly began to swell. The household was thrown into panic. An unmarried daughter carrying a child was, in that era, a matter of the gravest shame, one that could bring ruin upon the entire family. When questioned, the girl could only recount truthfully what had happened at the shrine, nothing more. The matter was eventually reported all the way to the royal court and reached King Sukjong's ears. Rather than alarm, the king felt only quiet joy. That very night, he traveled to Gilju, Myeongcheon himself, and spoke firmly to the girl's parents. This is a matter I understand fully. The full story will come later. For now, see that she is well cared for, given good medicine, and allowed to carry the child safely to term. With such a command from the king himself, the parents could no longer question their daughter, and cared for her with the greatest devotion. 10 months later, she gave birth to a healthy son. Years passed, and the boy grew to be 5 or 6 years old. King Sukjong returned once more to that same cottage in Gakcheong. Just as 7 years before, the elderly couple sat weeping, though this time both of them wept together. The moment the king stepped through the door, the couple recognized his face at once. "You wicked man," they cried. "You took our child and left us weeping for 7 long years. Tell us what became of him." The king only smiled and reassured them. "Don't worry, the child is well. You'll understand everything by tomorrow morning. I am known as Mr. Lee of Hanyang. A palanquin will come for you at dawn. Travel from town to town until you reach the capital, and there you'll be reunited with both your son and your grandson." With these words, he quietly sent a sealed royal letter to the local official and returned to the palace. The next morning, exactly as promised, 2 fine sets of clothing and a palanquin arrived. Still uncertain, the elderly couple climbed aboard, and were carried from town to town, day and night, until within a few days they arrived in the capital. They were welcomed into a fine residence and cared for with great care. Once they had recovered their strength, King Sukjong summoned all his ministers and invited the elderly couple to what was announced as a tour of the palace. When they were finally brought before the throne itself, the couple studied the king's face carefully and said, "This face looks familiar. Might you be Mr. Li of Hanyang?" The ministers gasped at such bold words spoken to the king himself, but Sukjong only laughed and drew the couple close to his side. "Indeed, this is my home. Today you will meet your grandson. Come, greet your new in-laws as well." Only then did the king reveal the entire story before the assembled court. The girl's parents, the governor and his wife, and the old couple were brought together in the same room. "This child's mother is entirely without fault," the king declared. "I took pity on this elderly couple and chose a place where their departed son might be reborn as a grandchild, and by fate, that place became bound to your daughter. From this day forward, consider yourselves family." And so the truth came to light, and the old couple finally held their grandson in their arms. From that day on, the boy grew up surrounded by the love of both families. That's all for tonight's story. After 7 long years of grief, an elderly couple finally holds their grandson in their arms. It's the kind of story that warms the heart on a quiet night. Perhaps longing and waiting, in their own strange way, eventually find their way to fulfillment. Set down your own longings for tonight and walk gently into sleep. Have a warm night. Sleep well.